but it's working.
When you look at it, Siobhan, I think Divock Origi's involvement last season, 42 appearances in all competitions with 14 starts. That's pretty good, isn't it, for what you might call, what is a fringe player, really, essentially.
Yeah, for a player that you would say is one of their starters or one of their key players to impact that many games, it is massive. I think there's more games than you get for any women's season in the WSL. So I'd love to have that many games every season. But yeah, it's so important that you've got that strength and depth and to be able to kind of have players that are happy to be a bit part player. I say that in terms of it's a difficult one because you shouldn't be happy to not be playing because you want to play. But it's a squad game now. It's not just 1 to 11. You've got to understand your role and you've got to be a good person and you've got to have the right people in your squad that are happy to do that, that are happy to sit on the bench and know that they'll get their opportunity, know that they're trusted and they're valued. And I think that's one of the biggest things now is making sure that it's a squad game and that you've got a good, tight-knit squad and everyone trusts each other and everyone responds to each other in the right way when they're called upon.
Can I talk about one player before we go off Arsenal? I know we were talking about Arsenal as well before that. But just about Gabriel, now, a lot of people watched him. I watched him very closely. He played 2 games against Chelsea last season, and he played really well for a 22-year-old. You know, he looked really comfortable. He looked really, really mature. He made 1 or 2 mistakes. One of them was for a Tammy Abraham goal over in Lille. But he's a player at 22 who could make a big difference to them at centre back. They brought Saliba back as well. I think he might need a little bit more work on him. But that's clearly the area that they have to work on. So we're talking about all the young players that might come in and get a little bit of a chance at Liverpool. They need to sort out the back. And how long is it we've been saying we need to sort out that back line at Arsenal? And when I'm looking at some of you, I'm thinking you're probably too old to not be too young to remember any time when that was not said, because it's so long that it's been. And if one of those two works alongside either Louise or whatever, it might actually be the answer to them, because that's the area they need to figure out.
Before we move on to Arsenal and look at them more closely, and exactly what you were just saying there, Pat, just a final point on Rhian Brewster, Vish. You touched on it earlier, and the benefit of him maybe sticking around and learning off the front three, because what a front three they are to learn off. The Athletic article that I mentioned a bit earlier picks up on what Klopp said recently about Brewster, and that his criticism, if you like, is that he just needs him to be more involved in games. He's definitely a proven finisher. I think all of us can agree on that. But this centre-forward role, it has evolved a lot, certainly over the last decade. And when Klopp talks about Firmino, he talks about him as the engine, which I suppose proves he does so much more, doesn't he, rather than just score goals. He plays such a big part in that front three, even when he's off the ball. And I suppose that could be a huge benefit of Rhian Brewster sticking around and adding that skill.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Firmino is a perfect example of that kind of a player where he plays up front, but yet he sometimes doesn't touch the ball that much, but it's the work he does off the ball in terms of pulling, you know, opposition defenders out of position, the way he links up with Mane and Salah, and that is something definitely that I think Rhian Brewster can learn off of if he does stay. And I suppose another element to it as well, if you're thinking about a manager who could potentially bring you into the first team and develop you, Jurgen Klopp is one of the best, and he's proven that in recent seasons. You know, we look at Trent Alexander-Arnold in the last couple of games. Nico Williams has been playing because, of course, Alexander-Arnold is injured at the moment. So if you're Rhian Brewster, you might be thinking, actually, yes, I can learn off of the players that are currently there, but actually, I feel that Jurgen Klopp will throw me into the team at some point.
were in the 13th. Well, they're now, when the rain fell, 131 for 6 in the 17th. Tom Banton's been the star turner for England, 71 from 41 balls after he was dropped on fiver. A maiden 50 in T20s following his maiden ODI 50 in the last game he played for England during those one-day internationals against Ireland. Other wickets to fall recently, Owen Morgan, LBW sweeping it to Carr for 14. David Milan was run out for a run of ball 23. Moeen Ali caught behind for 8, and Lewis Gregory given his opportunity as an all-rounder with no Ben Stokes available. He'll be annoyed to fall. He was out for 2, stumped by Rizwan off Wazim. England earlier lost Bairstow in the first over, caught and bowled for 2, but 131 for 6 England in the 17th over. Fingers crossed we get on fairly soon, because this game is very interestingly poised, Emma.
Yeah, fingers crossed indeed. So rain stopping play at the moment then at the cricket. Ball by ball commentary of that carries on BBC Sounds and Sports Extra. But whatever the weather tomorrow, the Community Shield double-header will be happening at Wembley Stadium. At the moment we're previewing the men's side of things, so Liverpool taking on Arsenal. We've talked a lot of Liverpool, so we'll talk about Arsenal now. And don't forget, this game comes just 28 days after Arsenal were last at Wembley Stadium, which ended well for them. They did lift the FA Cup. Mikel Arteta's side will be looking to improve on last season's 8th place finish in the Premier League. I think, Vishali, you touched on it earlier, it was 43 points they finished behind Liverpool. Siobhan, do you think we'll see that tomorrow? Pat touched on it as well. You don't really know what you're going to get with Arsenal, do you? But do you expect to see a much more competitive game, particularly given the way things went when they played each other in the restart?
I think so. I think the end of the season came at the wrong time for Arsenal. When you're on a roll, you want to continue, you want the games to keep coming thick and fast, and they did so well towards the end, and obviously winning the FA Cup, and it was fantastic for them, and I think they wouldn't have wanted the season to end. So it depends on how they've taken that break and how much of a role they can continue, how much momentum can they carry on from the end of last season, because hopefully for them that they'll have maintained that, and they'll go into it flying with full of confidence, full of belief, and knowing that they can go in. If they put in the performance that they did at the end of last season, there's no reason why they can't win. If this had been perhaps before lockdown, they might have gone into the game thinking, oh, we're playing Liverpool, let's go out there, make sure we keep it tight and just try and damage limitate. But I think now they can go out there and they can believe that they can win.
Pat, when you look at Mikel Arteta and the job he has to do with this Arsenal team, and actually what he's done so far, he's often compared, isn't he, to Pep Guardiola for obvious reasons, but actually, would you say the job he's got to do at Arsenal is quite similar to the one that Jurgen Klopp has done or had to do with Liverpool?
That playing style wise, I still think it'll be closer to Pep though, or that's what he would like to do. But he's got a lot of good players in there, and you know, just to see how some of them are going to come on. I mean, number one, you know, I'll go on about it, and it's not just because he's Scottish, but Kieran Tierney, honestly, I watched him all the way through in his time in City. He is fabulous, absolutely fantastic. I can't tell you how good a player he is. So he's going to be very, very special. He's had a few injuries and it's been an up and down period, but if he gets a period of time, you are going to love watching that guy play. But other players like, you know, Ceballos, we watched him coming in. Now, I'm going to say something. We have to delicately tiptoe around this, chaps, right? He is a fabulous player. I don't like him. Yet. Okay?
So much so tiptoeing straight, say it how it is. Say how you really feel, Pat.
No, the reason why I say it, now, there is a lot of players dive about and throw themselves about in the league. And don't pick out one or two, right? Unless somebody is quite obviously a wee bit more extreme than the others. And Ceballos has got to clear that up. He doesn't need to do it as much as he's doing just now. It was very noticeable the games that I watched him play. Particularly, this is a funny thing, not just him, all footballers at the moment, right? See when they go down, you never noticed how much they used to squeal. but because there's no fans in the ground now, you're hearing these mad squeals. And
that's very true. It's not just the theatrics, is it? They're covering it all.
It's extraordinary. It's, a lot of us watching the telly, 5 Live, and we put the sound over it, and you don't hear these squeals. And I'm thinking, I can't remember that. I played for 19 years professional. I can't remember anyone making that noise. And I'm wanting to phone for the air ambulance sometimes with some of the noises that I'm hearing. So we got to clear that up a bit. You know what I mean? And I'm saying it with a friend when it's, and an understanding and respect that he and a number of others are very, very good players. And sometimes it takes a year or two in the Premier League to understand that that is not the way it is here. But apart from that, you get the best out of Ceballos. You look at Torreira as a really good player as well. I really like what we're slowly but surely building. But I don't think it's finished yet. Up front, looks brilliant. At the back, really looking forward to what Gabriel brings. Defensively, for the full-back areas, I think that'll be fine as well. So you can see the build. It's slow, but sure. But he's been given a big lift by that trophy, that FA Cup.
But let's hope it doesn't rain tomorrow, Pat. We won't want any excuses for those players slip-sliding around that pitch, do we? Particularly not in the midfield.
Yeah, do it. So it's up to the referees to get that one right. And you remember the cup final when Chelsea had the player sent off, Xhaka went down. I think it was in that occasion. And you thought, well, actually, you got that completely wrong there. But it was, the yelp at that point that made the difference. You've got to kind of play that out of the game. And I think Arsenal basically are far better than that. They are much better.
Let's drill things down a little bit more. We've talked a bit there about Ceballos, the Arsenal midfield, and we mentioned a bit earlier about the back line, which we'll go back to. But I want to talk about the situation in goal for Arsenal, because it is a fascinating one. It looks as though Leno would be likely to start, well, because Martinez is quarantining, I think, by all accounts, and Leno has recovered from injury. We'll hear from Mikel Arteta first. Here's what he had to say about the goalkeeping situation.
Well, I love to have 2 goalkeepers at the level of Bern and Emi. Last year when Bern got injured, if somebody had some doubts about them, his character or qualities, he's shown what he's able to do, and he didn't do it for 1 game. He did it for 10, 11 games in a row, and I'm delighted to have both of them. But they both know that the first day in pre-season, you start again, fight for your place, and show us who is the one who deserves the chance to start. I don't want to keep them both happy. I want the one that is not playing to be upset and then challenge the next player to make him better, or if not, earn his place to do that. And there's no difference. I don't see personally any difference with goalkeepers with fullbacks, so they know that. I've been really clear with them about that, and hopefully they can make each other better, and most importantly, the team better.
So that's what the Arsenal manager Mikel Arteta had to say about the goalkeeping situation. Adam Crafton of The Athletic has written a piece suggesting that Leno is the number 1 choice. Siobhan, we'll come to you on this as a goalkeeper yourself. I don't know if you've ever been in a situation like this, but what's it like, do you think, for these 2 players at the moment, particularly now Martinez? Because you train so closely, don't you, as a unit, but is there any part of you that's kind of hoping the other one makes a mistake?
I don't think it's hoping the other one makes a mistake. I think it's hoping that you get your chance. It's that different mindset. You never wish badly. I'd like to think that people wouldn't wish badly, I'm sure some people will, on your teammate, because that impacts the team as a whole, and you're there. So that if you're playing the best that you can play, you're on form, you're better than your opponent, your teammates, that you're going to get the opportunity. It's not Leno's number 1, so it doesn't matter what you're doing, you're not going to play unless he's injured. I think so long as you know you're being given a fair chance, then you can be happy with that. You might not be content with sitting on the bench, and by all means, Martinez has said kind of he's been offered by a number of different clubs to be number 1, and I can understand at this point of his career he needs to go out and play games. He wants to be the number 1. He wants to be somewhere where he feels valued and he feels like he's their man. So yeah, it'll be really interesting who he goes with and whether Martinez does remain at the club.
I think it's really intriguing situation that Mikel Arteta finds himself in, because it's a tough decision for him, because Leno was definitely the club's #1. But then when Emi Martinez played, when Leno obviously got injured, he did so well. And I think a lot of the players in defence particularly spoke about how calm they felt playing with him in goal. And he hasn't done anything wrong really to be put out of that first team. It's only that Leno has now recovered from his injury that, you know, there has to be a decision made there. And I actually interviewed Martinez shortly after the restart. And, you know, I asked him about spending a decade essentially waiting for this opportunity. And he said one of the words that he described himself as is determined. And he said, you know, I'm patient, I'm determined, and I really want to be #1. So he spoke about that quite a lot, the idea of being #1. He's obviously waited a long time, and I think that he feels he's definitely good enough to be #1 at Arsenal. I think his preference is definitely to stay at Arsenal, but I think it'll be hard for him if he spends another season, you know, playing second fiddle to Leno. What decision he obviously then has to make next season, or even in the coming weeks, I think, because I think he's not done anything wrong to not be playing. At the same time, for Arteta, I do believe him in that he's going to look at training and he's going to see how they train. And Leno will obviously play tomorrow, so this is his chance to show Arteta really what he can do back in the side again. But it'll be interesting to see how the defence and the goalkeepers start to communicate and link up and play, because that could also be a big factor in terms of the system as a whole in who Arteta eventually goes for.
Pat, the other thing about Martinez as well in particular, and it's been said a lot, it's off the pitch as well. It's the way he's carried himself. He does seem to be extremely professional, and particularly at Arsenal, when you look at some of the characters in that dressing room and the unrest that there has been off the pitch, that's another huge reason to keep him at that club and try and prioritise him. But how do you see it panning out?
Well, some managers absolutely love that and value that as much as, you know, the tough one between the two goalkeepers will go for that. I mean, I will go to the superior knowledge of Siobhan every day of the week on this. Goalkeepers are a very special breed, and as outfielders, we don't know these things, we don't understand these things, even how they work with each other so closely. But, you know, they should be at each other's throats, but they somehow manage to keep this kind of relationship going and be very, very professional. But I think my favourite word that Siobhan said there was honesty. You know, what you want is fairness from the manager. If you ain't getting that, now most players feel that, you know, if you're not getting that, someone else is getting, you know, you're getting overlooked for someone else. It annoys them. But goalkeepers, I think it's even worse because it's so specific, it's so obvious. And you look at, I mean, if you maybe compare it to, say, Manchester United, you know, De Gea going through that tough spell that he went through, and I'm thinking, Romero's playing better than him. Well, that better not happen to them this year. You know, I think Dean Henderson will be hanging around at Manchester United. You have to be fair with the goalkeepers, because if you just keep on going for the big name, it infuriates, and that can really poison the atmosphere. So if Martinez is the better keeper for a little period of time, I think he will. I don't think there's any doubt about it. I think Arteta, he will not be biased between one or the other. He will just go for the best one, and that's what we need to do. Because if you don't, it gets really ugly.
It's interesting, one of the things that you just said about Martinez being a good person, or being a good teammate, being good around the group. And it's something that I've always kind of looked at in goalkeepers is, are the ones that are most successful and the ones that get picked time and time again to play for the top teams, are they the ones that are potentially a little bit harder to drop, have that bit of arrogance, have that not saying that goalkeepers aren't nice people, because I'm definitely not saying that at all. But if you're a nice person, if Martinez is good around the team, does that make him easy to drop? Does that make him... He's not going to kick up a fuss. He's a good person to be around, so it doesn't matter if he's on the bench. But Leno, I don't know enough about him as a person. It might be, if I put him on the bench, there's going to be quite a bit more unrest. So I'm going to make an easy decision for myself and for the team, as opposed to what's right for the actual goalkeeper.
I'm going to very quickly jump in and say, Siobhan, you're 100% right. That is absolutely spot on. I've noticed that with various players in various positions, but maybe goalkeepers more than anything else. If you get a really truculent one, you know, they really want that. And I can't talk about the women's game. In men's game, that was always the case. And you're right, that bit of arrogance, that's sometimes made the difference. And I feel quite saddened by that, because, you know, it shouldn't be the case, but it's worked time and again. You're spot on.
With that then, if we're looking at the character of a goalkeeper and how important that is and how they might interact with other players, Siobhan, I'll come back to you again on this. If we're looking slightly further forward then, and the centre-half pairing that's going to be for Arsenal this season, it looks as if they're looking to sign Gabriel from Lille. William Saliba, who they signed last summer, is probably likely to feature this season as well. As a goalkeeper, whether it is Leno or Martinez, do you think they'd want some familiarity at the start of this season, go back to one of the centre-halves that they were using, whether it's David Luiz, or do you think it's time to just roll the dice, take a gamble from the very start and begin as a fresh new unit? What do you think from a goalkeeping perspective is better for you personally?
For me, I think consistency is key. So if you're going to make changes, make them at the start, and if you can, as much as possible, stick with it. Stick with it and give them the opportunity to thrive, give them the opportunity to succeed and to develop together. I think if you start with the players that they had done before and they weren't sure with, and then gradually bring new players in, there's no consistency for the goalkeepers, for the back line, how they communicate, how they work together, and you're going to keep having the same mistakes over and over again, just with different people in front of you. If you've got those players in, you bought them for a reason, put them in there, trust them, and let them develop. Things might not be perfect straight away, but at least you're giving them that opportunity. And my key word is definitely consistency. And if they've got that, then you're giving everybody a chance.
I think it's interesting. You think about Chelsea, for example, and you know, the amount of criticism that Kepa got last season. And yes, he did make lots of individual errors, but you think, how much did it actually affect him that centre-back partnership was changing so much last season? You know, he didn't have that consistency in front of him, and you just think, how much did that actually impact on his individual performance? And it's interesting at Arsenal because at the moment they've got 7 centre-backs at the club. Now, some of them are injured. When Gabriel joins, it will be 8. And I actually think what's happening at Arsenal in terms of who they're recruiting, I think there's a short-term fix here, there's a medium to long-term fix, and there's a longer-term fix in that I think David Luiz probably will start the season as one of those centre-backs just because of his experience. Mikel Arteta loves him in and around the group. I think Pablo Mari next to him would be preferred, but Mari, of course, is injured. So I think Saliba does well tomorrow, for example, he could be starting, but I actually think it could just be Rob Holding, David Luiz. Mari comes back into the fold. I think it could change to Mari and David Luiz because they look quite good together. In that game against City, of course, until Mari got injured. But longer term, certainly, if you look at the ages of William Saliba and Gabriel, they are the long-term future in terms of the centre-backs at Arsenal. So it looks like Arteta has clearly seen this is a big issue for Arsenal. We need to sort out the defence. We've got a player in David Luiz last season who could work for 1 or 2 years. Pablo Mari for the sort of shorter to mid-long-term future. And then you've got these 2 players in Saliba and Gabriel, who are the long-term futures for Arsenal. So it looks like there's a clear plan there of progression in terms of a key area where Arsenal really suffered from in recent years.
Pat, do you think that's the right way forward, if that was the case, to start your season with that centre-half pairing of Holding and David Luiz?
It's a temptation, but David's usually a little bit better in the 3. If you put him in the back 3, he's much better player, and often have a little wind up with Chelsea fans who, you know, a lot of them are saying, well, we were happy to get rid of David Luiz because, you know, the mistakes have been made. Well, the only difference between last year and the year before was David Luiz wasn't there, and they lost a lot more goals, so I don't know, those statistics don't really hold up particularly well. But David has always been better, you know, certainly in the latter part of his career in a 3, so it may well be that you get a chance to get one of the younger ones in there in a 3. And if you look at the type of players, again, I'll try not to look at Kieran Tierney too much, but him as a wing-back, he plays left centre-back, he's perfectly comfortable there. Left-back, as a left wing-back, he's absolutely stunning. So he puts, you know, the type of crosses and the number of crosses in that you get from Robertson at Liverpool. He is that good. So, you know, it may well be that Arteta has a lot of centre-backs, exactly as we said, Vishani. However, you might need them because you might start with 3, and I'm not sure that would be a bad idea.
Pat, I think we need a sound effect for every time you mention Kieran Tierney, like a ding ding ding.
Oh, absolutely. and I'll accept that. I want people to remember the fact I used to go on about this guy up. He used to play up in Scotland, and I used to say, no, yeah, listen to this guy. He's great. This guy Van Dijk, and everyone can ignore me. And I'm going, no, he's great, honestly. Well, Tierney's pretty damn special as well.
Right, well, that concludes our Community Shield chat for now. We've talked Liverpool, we've talked Arsenal, so that's the men's side of things, which will kick off at 4:30 tomorrow afternoon at Wembley Stadium. But don't forget, before that, we've got the Women's FA Community Shield, the first version in 12 years. Which actually, Siobhan Chamberlain, we're going to be asking you about that shortly, after 8 o'clock actually. But first, Manchester United and England defender Harry Maguire has been in the news all week, and he spoke exclusively to the BBC Sport editor Dan Roan. He said he feared for his life when Greek police arrested him last week as he thought he was being kidnapped. He has been found guilty of assaulting police and bribery, but his legal team lodged an appeal against the verdict. In accordance with Greek law, the appeal nullifies Maguire's conviction, and there will be a full retrial in a more senior court. Dan started by asking him what it was like when he found himself in jail.
Yeah, it was really hard. It's not something I ever want to do again. I don't wish it on anybody. It's the first time I've ever been inside a prison, and yeah, it's been hard for myself, but I think probably it has been a lot harder for my family.
Who do you owe an apology to, if anybody?
I don't feel like I owe an apology to anybody. An apology is something when you've done something wrong. Do I regret? Obviously, the situation has made it difficult. I play for one of the biggest clubs in the world, so I regret putting the fans and the club through this. But I did nothing wrong. I found myself in a situation where it could have happened to anybody and anywhere.
You've appealed and you've been granted a retrial, and as we've heard, that means that your conviction is effectively nullified. You're now an innocent man again in the eyes of the Greek law legal system. How confident are you, Harry, sitting here now that you will eventually clear your name?
I have great faith in the Greek law. The retrial will give us more time to prepare, gather the evidence, allow witnesses into the court, and I'm really confident that the truth will be told and come out. I'm strong mentally and I'll come over this.
How badly hurt were you?
Yeah, obviously they hit me a lot on the legs. It wasn't on my mind. I was in that much of a panic, fear, scared for my life.
You actually feared for your life, did you?
Yeah, for sure, all the way through it. Until I got into the prison cell, where, like I said, I felt relief when I got there because the guys who was in there already told me that where I was, and obviously I was with my friend as well who was in the cell with me. So that's when I calmed down a little bit, and the panic and anxiety had come away from me.
I mean, there will be some who don't believe you, inevitably. How much does that bother you, and what would your message be to them?
It doesn't bother me, to be honest. Obviously, I know what happened that night. My friends and my family know what happened that night. That's the main thing. I think the people who are close to you, the ones who trust you. My conscience is clear. I know exactly what happened that night.
Despite everything you've said, the facts remain, sadly, that you were found guilty of abusing and assaulting the police and of attempting to bribe them. Given all that, how can you remain captain of one of the biggest clubs in the world?
Well, yeah, obviously, you see a lot of reports going around, and it's such a huge honour to be captain of Manchester United, something I'm really proud of. It's a massive privilege to play for the club, never mind to be the captain. Obviously, it's not my decision to make, but one thing I will say is how supportive the club have been from top to bottom. They've been great with me, and I thank them for that. Obviously, we've had a long, hard season, a tough season. We wanted to get away for a break. Obviously, we went out for a couple of drinks that night. I wasn't planning on going out every night and drinking. I'm sure we'd have had some great days and some great times out there in terms of chilling around the villa and going out to the beaches and things. But like I said, I don't see myself as regretting going out there. I've been to Mykonos before, I had a great time. I've been with my family before, I had a great time. So no, I can't say I was away with my family, in couples. If someone wanted a picture, they can have a picture. If someone wanted something signing, I'd sign it. I didn't feel the need for that, and obviously it's probably changed my mind on that.
I was about to ask you that. Is that going to make you act differently in the future, do you think? Will you think twice now about being as open as that, or even maybe going back to Greece in the future?
No, like I said, with Greece, I have nothing against Greece. Obviously, the few individuals who was involved on that night I'm not putting everyone into that category because I love Greece. I've grew up in that country in terms I've been with my family time and time again. Obviously, with the security, it's probably something that I need to probably look into. I don't want to do it. I don't want security coming away with me. I don't feel like I should need to, but in the current climate, like you said, and things and the situation I found myself in, would it have helped? Yeah, for sure.
Do you understand why Gareth Southgate withdrew you from the England squad, having initially named you after he heard that verdict?
Yeah, I understand. Obviously, I'm disappointed. I love playing for my country. I'm physically good. I'm mentally strong. Like I've said previously, mentally, I feel like I can get over this. I'm a strong lad. I feel more for the girls who was on the minibus and my little sister, who were suffering the most from this. But no, I'm physically and mentally, I'm ready to play. So no, I'm disappointed, but of course I understand.
The appeal could take a year or maybe even longer. How hard will it be to have that sort of hanging over you for all that time?
No, I think I'll get over it pretty quickly. I think obviously it's been a whirlwind of a few days for us, ups, downs, and obviously getting the verdict of what happened, and then obviously them accepting the retrial was the only bit of positive news we've had over the last 7 days or so. But no, I think I'll get over it pretty quickly. I'll put it to one side. I know what happened that night. My conscience is so clear. I know the truth, and that's all I can say. When I speak about it, I get a bit worked up, but that's because it just makes me feel a bit angry inside. But no, I'm sure for me, I'll move on, and I'm mentally strong enough at the moment. Like I said, you probably speak to all my family, and they'll probably say that I'm the one the best at dealing with it.
Harry Maguire there with BBC Sports' Dan Roan. The full interview is available via BBC Sounds. Pat Nevin, before we go to the news, what are your thoughts on that interview he gave?
Well, go before the interview. When I first heard about this, when it broke that he was being found guilty, I said, this smells wrong. This smells all wrong. It doesn't add up. I've been with footballers before. Sometimes they behave badly, immorally, illegally. But this didn't smell right. Being with his sister, being with couples, you know, the fact that he was trying to get her to hospital after a dangerous situation, the fact that the quotes attributed to them sounded ludicrous to me. It sounded like a 4-year-old had made them up. It didn't sound right, and I was very disappointed with the media reaction, particularly in large parts of the UK, towards it. It's totally and utterly believing. So, Harry, stay strongly.
The voice there of Pat Nevin here tonight with Siobhan Chamberlain and Vishali Bhardwaj. Lots coming up. We're going to be previewing the women's side of tomorrow's FA Community Shield, as well as looking at fans at games this weekend. Yes, you heard that correctly. That's all after the news.
Digital, BBC Sounds, smart speaker and online.
This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
BBC News at 8 o'clock. This is Nikki Cardwell. A haulier from County Armagh has pleaded guilty to the manslaughter of 39 Vietnamese migrants found dead in a lorry trailer in Essex last October. Ronan Hughes, who's 40, also admitted conspiracy to commit unlawful immigration. The second man, Eamon Harrison, who's 23, denied the same charges at a hearing at the Old Bailey. The government's call for workers to return to the office has been met by warnings against trying to force people back. The Equality and Human Rights Commission, Labour and some unions have all said that people should have a choice. The boss of the food chain Itsu and founder of Pret a Manger, Julian Metcalf, says a return to work can be easily achieved.
They could definitely make sure there's enough public transport. We could all come into work at different times so it's not too congested. Really good cleaning routines. And some people, of course, can work from home. But I worry about productivity, I worry about camaraderie, and I worry about trying to build any dynamic company. You need your people together.
The Department of Health says lockdown rules are to be eased. West Yorkshire, where rates of coronavirus have decreased. Restrictions on 2 households mixing will be lifted in some areas, including Bolton, Stockport and Trafford on Wednesday. Police investigating the abduction of 3 boys by their father in South London have arrested another 4 people. 8 people have already been questioned and released on bail. Lisa Hampley reports.
6-year-old Bilal, Ebra, who's 5, and 3-year-old Yassine were taken when playing in their foster family's garden in Colston in South London. An image of their 26-year-old father, Imran Safi, has been circulated to all ports and borders amid concerns that he may be attempting to take them abroad. It's understood the boys were due to be formally adopted, and police believe that could be why they were abducted. All 4 men arrested this morning are thought to be known to Mr. Safi and are being questioned on suspicion of being involved in the abduction.
A murder investigation's been launched in Suffolk after bones found in a river were confirmed to be human. The remains were spotted in 2 black bin bags in the River Stour yesterday afternoon. Thousands of people have joined a rally in Washington, D.C. to demand racial justice on the anniversary of the speech by Martin Luther King, which galvanised the civil rights movement. Philonise Floyd, whose brother George Floyd died after being pinned to the floor by a white police officer, addressed the chanting crowds.
It's never been more clear than change right now. It's happening right now because we demand it. Everyone here has made a commitment.
And the weather. Most places will become drier tonight with a few clear spells. However, showers will linger in East Anglia and the southeast of England. It'll feel quite chilly with lows of 8 to 12 Celsius. BBC News, it's 3 minutes past 8.
And in sport, rain is affecting the first T20 international between England and Pakistan at Old Trafford. Adam Mountford has the latest.
Yes, hi, and we've been off here for about 35 minutes because of steady drizzle. Not so long now then until we start losing overs in this match. We do have actually a spectacular sunset over the pavilion to my left, so I am hopeful we'll get some more play this evening. England had reached 131 for 6 when the delay came from 16.1 overs, Billings on 3, Jordan 2. England stumbling after a brilliant 71 by Tom Banton had taken them to 109 for 2 in the 13th over, but they earlier had lost Bairstow in the first over, but Milan and Banton had steadily at first led a recovery before Banton played some wonderful shots, moving through the gears. His flick 6 off Ralph was a real highlight, but after he holed out, they lost Ali for 8 and Gregory for 2 as Pakistan fought back. So England 131 for 6. I suspect that might be the close of their innings, and we're just hoping we have enough time for some sort of Pakistan reply.
Adam, thank you. Ball by ball commentary continues on 5 Live Sports Extra. The England and Surrey batsman Ollie Pope has been ruled out for months. He needs surgery on an injured shoulder. Johanna Konta was beaten in 3 sets by Victoria Azarenka in the semi-finals of the Western and Southern Open Tennis. Azarenka will face Naomi Osaka in the final after the Japanese knocked out Elise Mertens. In the Pro 14, there are around 700 fans watching Edinburgh host Glasgow at Murrayfield. The latest score there is Edinburgh 0, Glasgow 7. And Red Bull's Max Verstappen was fastest in second practice at the Belgian Grand Prix, with Daniel Ricciardo's Renault also ahead of both Mercedes.
Scott Mills and Chris Stark.
Good morning, Jamie Redknapp.
Jesse Lingard. For some reason, I didn't realise this, but there is something on YouTube that I can't say his name. So whenever they picked out about 10 interviews of me calling him Lindegaard, Lindengarden, Lindenhofen, and I felt so bad because it's like, how rude is that? He's, plays for Man United, plays for England, I can't even get his name right.
We got to let you go, mate. Jamie Redknapp. Thank you for being on.
Scott Mills and Chris Stark. Listen now with the BBC Sounds app. This is 5 Live Sport.
Good evening and welcome back to 5 Live Sport tonight with me, Emma Saunders, and here with me for the next half an hour we've got Pat Nevin, Siobhan Chamberlain and Vaishali Bhardwaj. So coming up we're going to be talking about Celtic and their Champions League defeat, and then at 8:30 the checkered flag team, they're going to be here to preview this weekend's Belgian Grand Prix. Then from 9:30 it's the Match of the Day podcast, so you'll be able to hear Gary Lineker and Jermaine Genus in conversation with Roberto Di Matteo. Very shortly, we're going to be talking about fans heading back to games this weekend. Yes, there's going to be some fans. Onto that shortly. But first, we've been talking Community Shield. So we've previewed the men's side of things. That's going to be Arsenal taking on Liverpool. But let's talk about the other side of the double header. As before 4:30, the two women's teams will be taking on each other. So that's going to be at 12:30, and you've got Chelsea facing Manchester City. For the first time since 2008, there's going to be a Women's Community Shield. Which, Siobhan, I wondered if I could ask you first why that is. I suspected it might be because of the way the women's season used to line up, because it didn't line up with the men's season or the FA Cup, more importantly. But do you know why it's taken until this year for it to happen and for this double header to go ahead?
I'm not entirely sure. I know that obviously from 2011 would have been the end of the 2010 season, the FAWSL started, and they then moved to having a summer league. So you're right that the timings wouldn't have coincided particularly well, but I'm not sure the excuse was 2 or 3 years before that. But let's forget about that and let's focus on the positives and say how fantastic it is that this season that the women's game is right before the men's game, and it's a fantastic start to the FAWSL season.
Yeah, it certainly is, Pat. How vital is it, do you think, we've got this Community Shield now back in the women's game? Do you think it will be held in a higher regard than the men's?
Well, it may well be. From the women's game, it may well be the case. The fact that it is being played at Wembley this time, you say that massive big gap, the 12 years. And the last game wasn't played in the celebrity surroundings, as we well know, as at Wembley Stadium. However, the fact that the two teams that are playing here have got world-class stars playing in this game, this should be a fantastic game. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I'm looking forward to that game slightly more. I am. In the Men's Champions League. Actually, people who know me and know my feelings about women's football, they know that I really mean that. But players such as, I mean, Rose Lavelle is one of my favourite players in women's football, maybe argue my favourite one just now. And she's moved to Manchester City. And the excitement I have with that, and yeah, add what they've got in the middle of the park there, Sam Mewis and Caroline Weir, obviously Scotland, have to mention the Scottish player every now and again.
There he goes, that buzzer, I set it off again. Do you know what, it should be electric shock actually, shouldn't it, on your finger or something like that. But
it is exciting because Man City are building up. Now there is a suggestion that Lucy Bronze is going as well to Manchester City, so yeah. And if that does happen, you put Lucy in there as well, that's going to be an incredibly strong side, and that is going to, yeah, and we know last season they were very strong anyway, and they will still be, as you know, a bit miffed about how the way the season ended. This should be a cracker. I'm not calling it a grudge match, but this should be an absolute cracker.
I'll whisper it because I don't want to upset any Arsenal or Liverpool fans, but I'm also looking forward to the women's game. Anyway, Vaishali, the last Women's Community Shield, as we mentioned, was over a decade ago. It was held at Moss Rose, which is the home of Macclesfield Town. Tomorrow, it's at the National Stadium. With all respect to Macclesfield, that is quite a difference, isn't it?
Absolutely, and it's the kind of stage that the women's game deserves. I think if you're going to bring back the Community Shield, you need to put it at Wembley, because the men's game, that final happens there. So why would women's game be held anywhere else, in my view? And I think that having it at Wembley tomorrow, having it on the same day, crucially as well, I think, of the men's final, I think that will really help raise the profile of the women's game, and it's the kind of stage where those games should be played on. And I think it's quite interesting actually having it on the same day, because if you think of a football fan, for example, tomorrow, especially if it's raining tomorrow, which it's probably going to do, you're thinking you're at home, you're going to be kind of gearing up to the men's final. You're probably going to have the women's final on if you're not particularly going out to watch the women's final, you're probably going to have the TV on all day. You're probably going to watch some of these players for the first time, and that could really drum up more interest in the women's game. And you know, we've already seen just what the World Cup did for the women's game in the last year or so. And think now initiatives like this, having it at Wembley on the same day before the men's final, I think it's going to be absolutely huge. And also, we've got two fantastic teams in the final as well. I mean, you know, Chelsea, I think, who've never won a Community Shield before. You've got Gareth Taylor going for his first title. You've got World Cup stars. You know, Pat's already mentioned it. You know, new players coming at City. This is going to be a really fiercely contested match. You think about City as well and the kind of revenge factor that they might have because of the fact that they didn't win the title when it was ended early. So this is going to be a really good contest, and I think when fans who particularly don't watch the women's game, if they watch a really good contest of football tomorrow, hopefully that will help raise the game and the profile of the women's game even more.
It really is a mouth-watering tie, isn't it, when you look at how domestically dominant Chelsea are and the revenge factor, as you mentioned there, for Manchester City. And Siobhan, how great to see these two teams in a final together, because believe it or not, as good as they are, as dominant as they are in English women's football, they haven't met at Wembley before, is that right?
No, they've never played a cup final against each other.
Yeah.
It's bound to be a fantastic occasion and a fantastic match, and yeah, the players that Pat's mentioned, and yeah, very exciting to look forward to watching. I think Manchester City have got 9 central midfield players for 3 positions, all of which would probably start for most teams in the WSL. So keeping those players happy is going to be one hell of a task. But also you look at Chelsea, they've got Fran Kirby coming back from illness, and that's like having a new signing for them. She's been fantastic, so it'll be great to see her back playing. And they've just signed Jessie Fleming, Leopold, Niamh Charles, all players which will come in to the squad and want to go out there and play and perform well. So it's not just Manchester City that have strengthened over this break. There's some exciting players at Chelsea there for this game.
Well, that's the Community Shield, which will be happening behind closed doors at Wembley Stadium tomorrow. A double header, so both the women's and the men's finals taking place.
Wait a minute, just before you go,
get
that buzzer out. I contractually have to mention Erin Cuthbert anytime you talk about.
There we go, ding ding ding, completes the pack.
Thank you. But no, to be fair, she is rather brilliant, and I mean, she's a player that, you know, she's very, very young. She's coming on, she's playing for Chelsea. She's like, but she could be a player who could be world class. I think she was good at the World Cup, and she's growing as a player. That's a player, if you've not watched any of the football yet, go and have a look at her.
But it shows just how good that team is, doesn't it? The fact we hadn't even mentioned her.
Yeah, I know, and there's so many of them. I mean, Sam Kerr coming over and
yeah.
the goals that she's scored over her career. Just as a player that is creative and can play in so many different positions, is a player that it's nothing got to do with men's or women's football or anything. She's just a great player.
There we are. Keep an eye out.
You
for
mentioned
Erin.
Scottish player. You mentioned Scottish players. I think I've got to mention goalkeepers.
There we go. All right, time to squeeze that in. Go on, Siobhan.
You've got Karen Bardsley, who's come back from injury, and she'll be wanting that number 1 spot back from Ellie Roebuck. You've obviously got Carly Telford and Ann-Katrin Berger both fighting it out at Chelsea, and it's 4 of the top goalkeepers in the league there at two teams, and only 2 of them can play. The chat we had about at Arsenal, whether you've got Leno or Martinez, you've got the exact same problems at Manchester City and Chelsea. So it'll be very interesting from a goalkeeping perspective what happens there.
Well, plenty of characters then to listen out for and to look for on your TVs and radios tomorrow, as of course that game at Wembley is behind closed doors. But elsewhere, fans will start coming back into venues at elite sporting events from this weekend. Yes, you heard that correctly. Big news. So a number of pilot events are being held to trial having a limited number of fans inside venues. So tomorrow, Brighton are scheduled to face Chelsea in a friendly at the Amex. And on Sunday, Lewes FC of the Women's Championship will be taking on London Bees. So the Lewes General Secretary, Maggie Murphy, joins us now. Good evening to you, Maggie.
Hi there, how are you doing?
Well, all right. Well, football with fans, and you are the chosen ones. How exciting.
Yeah, it is really exciting. We're really pleased to have been selected. We put our hands up quite early on because, you know, it's so important for us to get the fans back, partly for the community to get, you know, people are so excited about being able to come back inside, but also financially, obviously, for a small club like ourselves, it's really crucial we can get people back through the door as well. So yeah, really pleased to get this pilot done and dusted. I'm sure we'll get lots of learning, and then hopefully we'll be able to open the doors up a little bit further when the season starts next month.
So by the sounds of it then, you sort of put your hand up and volunteered yourselves, but why was your match picked in particular? Because I'm sure many clubs said, please pick us.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, to be honest, but I do know that, you know, we can also give a lot of learnings to the men's non-league side as well. We play at the same stadium as our men's team, and so all the learnings that we'll get from hosting this friendly on Sunday can be shared with the other side as well. So I think that will be really helpful, because everyone is trying to figure out how to bring back fans, and we don't want to have a different setup on the women's side compared to the men's side. And that's actually really crucial when you think about the fans that come to both the men's games and the women's games. You don't want them doing two different types of things depending on who they're coming to watch. So yeah, there'll be plenty of lessons learned, I think.
What will it look like then, Maggie, in terms of, I suppose, the protocols and even things like going to the toilet? And do the fans all have to stand 2 meters apart, or do you trust that they come in groups? I think you're allowing 100 fans in, is that right?
Yeah, so we're having 100 fans come through the doors. I mean, normally we get about 550, 600, so it is quite reduced. So it will feel a lot emptier than we're used to. Although I know that our fans will be boisterous as ever. But yeah, no, we're actually, so normally when fans would come into the ground, they would expect to be able to wander all over the ground. We're going to be splitting it into 3 particular zones. One is the red zone. No one can go there apart from the players and the officials and anyone that's COVID tested. And then we're splitting the ground into two amber zones. One of those areas has that's the main stand for seated area, and there'll be a steward there that will kind of usher people to their seats, almost as though they were going to a restaurant. So that will be quite different. And then if you're going to be in the standing area, then we've been painting red bubbles on the floor. And so people, when they arrive, they will find themselves a bubble. There's larger bubbles if they're in 2s or 3s in a household group, for example. But if they're by themselves, then they'll just have to stick to their bubble. So we're piloting it. We'll see how it works. You know, and then all the other things we'll be signposting and making sure that it's as clearly communicated as possible, because I think that's the crucial thing. We want fans to feel like they're coming back to football. We want it to be a football game. We don't want it to be too rigid. So we need to give them as much information as we possibly.
The world will be looking at you in this one. You know, if anything goes wrong at all, you know, I mean, when it was came back to the Premier League games, and there was maybe 300 people in there, most of them obviously were journalists, etc. But the fear, you could almost see the fear at Manchester City, etc., in case they got anything wrong at all, and the press would be right down on top of them. So, is there any fears, any worries? Are you think, oh, it's all covered?
Oh, look, I mean, I'm obviously nervous that things will pop up that we haven't thought through. But at the same time, this is a pilot. So, you know, things will go wrong, and they're meant to go wrong. And we're meant to figure that out and report that back so that other people don't make the same mistakes. In an ideal world, everything will run perfectly and people will come to us going, oh my gosh, how did you manage that? But we kind of know that there might be a couple of slip-ups. But we also have to trust that people are sensible themselves. We can't actually do everyone's thinking for them. Everyone has to be respectful. Everyone has to keep their distance. And everyone, in fact, they're pretty privileged in a way to be able to access the game on Sunday. So, yeah, we're just hoping that people are sensible. And also, we'll be asking people for their feedback as well. We'll be asking them what they liked, what they didn't like, how we could do things better. You know, and all of that's going to be really, really helpful going forward as well.
And how excited are the players as well about the fans coming back into the stadium, you know, even though it's not the full capacity? Because I've spoken to so many players and they really did not like this period where there were no fans around in the stadiums.
Yeah, and like I say, our fans are boisterous. They like to sing. They've been eager to see our new signings as well. So I think for them, our last competitive game was against Arsenal in the FA Cup, and that was 6 months ago. So I think they're really keen. We've already had a few behind closed doors friendlies, but they're really keen to have the fans get behind them and have that kind of semblance that, yeah, football is coming home and, you know, things are slowly getting back to normal. But it will be a huge boost. I think for them, they're really keen that the fans can come and see them and just get that sense of a football match again. They'll be very excited to have them back in.
Now, I know, Maggie, I can hear it in your voice, you're very, very excited about what's to come this weekend and looking forward and getting fans back into stadiums. But if you don't mind, can you just give us a bit of an insight what it's been like the last few months, especially for a club like Lewes? We hear an awful lot, you know, about the Premier League and the clubs in the EFL or the leagues higher up in women's football as well. But what's it been like for Lewes?
Yeah, it's been tough. I think that a few members of staff are probably a little bit frazzled by now. You know, I think one of the challenges is that protocols change day by day and we don't have the resources that the big clubs have. So there's only a small handful of people that are really trying to make sure that everything is as safe as possible. You know, we're conducting COVID testing, but again, every small thing is a new obstacle for us to get our heads together and figure out how do we solve this when we don't have the limited when we have to be really communicative with our players, with our coaches, so that they back us and they understand exactly why we're doing things, because we can't just rely on throwing money at a problem, I guess. It's been tricky, you know, the fact that the season was curtailed, that was an immediate drop in income, as you know, was the case for everyone. But you know, income with the fans coming in, that's really crucial for us, but also crucial for us as a community. It's not just about us at the club, but we have a couple of companies that supply us with our food and our drink, all local suppliers, so they've been hit as well. So it's not just about the first team on the women's side, it's not just about the first team on the men's side, it's a whole community and whole club effort to get the football back on, but I think everyone's going to benefit as a result.
Well, listen, Maggie, best of luck on Sunday, off the pitch and on it. And to those 100 going, wow, I'm sure you're so excited about the prospect of live sport in person. So hopefully it's a huge success. That was the Lewes General Secretary, Maggie Murphy, joining us ahead of their game this Sunday. They're going to be taking on London Bees, and fans will be there. 100 fans will be entering the Dripping Pan. Right, the time just gone 20 past 8. I think from 8:30 things are going to be moving on, but for now we can talk football, we can talk Celtic. It has been a disappointing few days for Celtic as they come to terms with the fact that they won't be playing in the group stages of the Champions League, and Ronnie Forsyth is going to talk to us now, our Scottish football reporter. Ronnie, before we get into the Champions League side of things, I understand you've got some breaking news.
That's correct, Emma, and it does affect Celtic and it affects Aberdeen. Celtic's volleyballing goalie has been given a 3-game ban for his quarantine breach. That's quarantine from COVID-19. He went to Spain for a day trip, as you do, and with a further 2-match penalty, suspended until February 28th. And the 8 Aberdeen players who went out for a meal on the evening that they lost at home in the first game of the season to Rangers have been given a suspended 3-game ban. So theirs is suspended until February. If there are no further breaches of the COVID regulations, then the ban will be lifted. And that's probably, in my view, judicious, and I'm pretty sure Pat would agree, because if Aberdeen had lost 8 players to suspension, albeit the 2 of them are long-term injuries, the sudden loss of 6 players to a 3-game suspension would have penalised their teammates as well, and been pretty punitive for the club. So it looks as though the SFA have got this one right. Bolingoli almost certainly would not have played for Celtic again after having decided to head for Spain, spend a night there, come back the next day on his 2 days off earlier in the month, and not tell anybody, and then be played against Kilmarnock, whom he endangered as well. So I think the SFA have got this one correct.
Go on, Pat, I can see you nodding away there, so we'll get your thoughts before we go back to Rodney.
Yeah, you're absolutely right that we had to get that. I mean, Bolingoli was, I think Celtic would have let him to get a bigger fine or suspension than that. They were furious about it, certainly Neil Lennon was. But it is tough times, isn't it, for Celtic just now? I mean, we didn't have Godson Ridwell the other night there when they get beat by Ferencváros. There's some reports about a number of players interested in leaving, such as Ayer. They had the Bolingoli affair, they're out of the Champions League. You know, are these really worrying times? And the one there is only one story, which is 10 in a row. Is it really in doubt? It's quite early to say it, but is it in doubt this season, Rory?
Well, my own feeling, having seen both teams, is that Celtic are perfectly capable of getting 10 in a row, for the simple reason that they've been there 9 times already. They know how it feels to pick up consecutive championships, and they have the skills. But this is an alarming, if you're a Celtic fan, an alarming development. The fact that there appear to be 5 players who are on the move or would like to be on the move. Chris Ajer, Olivier Ntcham, Odsonne-Edouard, Tom Rogic, Boli Bolingoli, not all commanding first team places all the time, but nevertheless 5 players, including your major assets, Odsonne-Edouard, and top scorer, and a man who undoubtedly, in my view, would have made a significant difference the other evening against Ferencvaros. Celtic looked insipid. My own feeling at the time, I said on the football podcast, was that too many players weren't stepping up to the plate. I hadn't heard what Neil Lennon had to say at that point, but he said the same thing: if you're not interested in being here, get out. Now, he was more circumspect today. I think he had decided that, or perhaps in discussion with others, that it was not prudent to keep attacking your squad like that. But it was passionate, as we expect from Neil Lennon. It was heartfelt, as we expect from him. But also, you can only tell your players they're not good enough so long. And remember that Celtic are now into the Europa League, so they can still get a European place, and they can still carry on as they did last season before lockdown, in getting all the way to the last 16 of the last 32 of the Europa League. The only problem is they conceded goals, late goals, in the way that they did against Copenhagen when we were knocked out before lockdown, and in the way they did a year ago in the Champions League when they lost 4-3 at home to Cluj of Romania. So that's an alarming fact that has had the Celtic fans talking loudly on social media.
And Roddy, what's the financial impact of all this then?
Well, Celtic don't budget to be in the Champions League group stage, as Rangers don't, but it's generally reckoned you're looking at between 20 and 30 million pounds if you get a group stage run, plus you've got through the qualifiers, and that's substantial. Now they'll make up, assuming that Odsonne-Edouard does get an expected transfer, probably back to his native France, then they'll make up a considerable amount of that money. But that money has been instrumental in putting them well ahead of Rangers over the past few years, the fact that they've been able to generate European money. To give you some perspective on this, on Wednesday night they were knocked out before the third round for the first time since 2005, when in Gordon Strachan's first game in charge they lost to Artmedia Bratislava in the opening qualifiers. So it's certain, as Pat said, 10 in a row is the absolute grail this season. Nevertheless, that's been a sore one for Celtic.
Pat, quick question for you. Do you think Celtic are victims of their own domestic success when you look at them on the European stage? We talk so much about the 10.
I mean, yeah, they do talk a lot about the 10, but it's actually sometimes it's been, they won't say it, but it's been quite easy for them because Rangers haven't been around, it hasn't been close to them for a lot of those 10. So to some degree they were able to put a lot of time, thought, effort, passion and money into, getting a little bit better in the Champions League. But let's be honest about it. Celtic really developing far into the Champions League, that is punching well above your weight. You talk about the finances they've got, it's fabulous for Scotland, but it's buttons when you compare it to the Premier League or Serie A, the very biggest clubs. And that was found out a couple of years ago when they played against PSG, and a lot of Celtic fans were upset and embarrassed about it, but they shouldn't have been. They're punched above the weight many times. May well be getting kicked out of the Champions League just now. It may well be that the focus will then go completely on that 10 in a row. Maybe that's not good news for Rangers and the rest.
Well, that's what you do feel, I must say. The one thing I will observe, and I know we're tight for time, but Rangers have got that 5-game run in the league at the moment where they haven't conceded a goal. That's their best ever since their Iron Curtain defence well back post-war. So there is a challenge going to come from Ibrox, I'm pretty sure of that. But
is it strong enough though, Roddy? That's the question.
That's the question the Rangers fans are asking. They're asking it about Alfredo Morelos. He was out of the squad against Kilmarnock last week because his attitude and training wasn't right. My guess is he will appear tomorrow at Hamilton. I'll be there to watch. Whether he plays the full game or not, I don't know. He looks as though he's for the off, but when?
To round things off then, Roddy, to sum up, this Celtic side, I know they've only played 3 league games, but what have you made of them as a whole? We mentioned at the top these rumblings about players perhaps wanting to leave, and then Lennon kind of going back on his word in that regard.
Well, he's backtracked a little and not been as harsh as he was on Wednesday night. But some questions have to be asked. Albion Ajeti and Patrick Klimala both came in for £8 million a total and didn't play the other night because they're not fully match fit. And I just wonder what's going to happen to Lee Griffiths, former Scotland striker, could still be a Scotland striker, but his attitude during the close season didn't please the manager. He's got an injury at the moment, we understand, but if he had been available on Wednesday night, I have no doubt that Celtic would have looked significantly sharper. So there's questions from front to back in that team, and this is going to be a very interesting and contentious season on both sides of Glasgow.
It certainly will. Thank you. That was Roddy Forsyth, our Scottish football reporter, giving us all the latest there on Celtic. Right, so the time is 8:30. In just a few minutes' time, we'll be handing over to our F1 team, who are going to be looking ahead to this weekend's Belgian Grand Prix. But before we do that, just a final word from our panel this evening: Pat Nevin, Siobhan Chamberlain and Vaishali Bhardwaj. Now listen, you three, I think I've worked it out. We have a window of 3 days, that's Monday to Wednesday, with no football at all. So any plans? I know we all said holidays are just not on the cards, but are we planning to have a bit of a football-free zone? Vaishali, I can see you smiling.
I'm going to be sleeping for the 3 days, I think, because once the season starts up properly, there won't be any sleep. So I think, sleeping might be a good option for me for those 3 days. Of course, if it is sunny, then I'll be outside. Sleeping probably in the park, though.
Yeah, I think that could be wishful, looking at the weather forecast for this weekend. What about you, Siobhan? You're involved with #United now, I think I read somewhere.
Yeah, I'm an ambassador for them and involved on with their committee. So it's a fantastic club to be involved in, and the women's fixtures came out last week, I think it was, and I think they've got Ipswich Town for their opening game. So I'm sure they'll be really excited about that and looking forward to getting up and running.
Yeah, and as an ambassador, then you kind of overseeing things off the pitch.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a lot of experience within the game. I don't want to say I'm old just yet. But I've seen a lot of the development of women's football since it's been completely amateur and having to pay to play, and working alongside that to it being as it is now. So I feel like I'd like to give back to the game and help clubs to develop and help people do it the right way. And if I can give the club some of my expertise and some of my knowledge, then that's fantastic.
And for you, Pat, you're going to be keeping a close eye on all the Scottish talent that's going to be at Wembley tomorrow, right?
Yes, I'm looking forward to actually a great weekend of football. Obviously, the games that are going to be played at Wembley, but do not forget the game we haven't mentioned yet, which is Wolfsburg versus Lyon.
Very true.
Champions League final. A game that I am desperate to see. Can Wolfsburg finally stop the mighty Lyon and what they've been doing for quite a few years? This is going to be a tight one. Should be a cracker.
Yeah, certainly will. Lots of football to look forward to then this weekend across both days, Saturday and on Sunday as well. We've been looking ahead to the Community Shield mainly this evening with our panel. That's Pat Nevin, Siobhan Chamberlain and Vaishali Bhardwaj. So thank you to you three for joining us. Just a reminder once more, it is a double header. So from 12:30, Chelsea women will be taking on Manchester City women. That is before Mikel Arteta's Arsenal will be taking on the Premier League champions Liverpool. And we'll have coverage of all of that on 5 Live Sports tomorrow. But up next here on 5 Live, Jenny Gow and the 5 Live F1 team will be looking ahead to the Belgian Grand Prix.
So the full F1 20 having signed on the dotted line, and even Williams.
За верхушки нашего рейтинга есть подвижки. Там за первое место вместе со Сбербанком, Яндексом и Газпромом соревнуется берлинская клиника Шарите, где лечат Навального. Причем интересно, что если даже не брать нынешние события, то вообще клиника Шарите – это самая популярная иностранная больница, если посмотреть на скане в исторической перспективе, потому что, напомню, именно в этой клинике по сюжету 17 мгновений весны рожает радистка Кэт. Тут в свое время лечились Борис Ельцин, Михаил Горбачев, Шеварднадзе, Тимошенко, Задорнов. Так что про эту клинику и раньше писали, хотя нынешний всплеск, конечно, рекордный, так много еще никогда не писали. Но вот полный новичок нашего рейтинга компаний, как показывает Скан, это башкирская содовая компания. Она впервые у нас и в топ-50, и даже в топ-30 Скана. Напомню, компания планировала разрабатывать Шихан Куштау. Местные активисты выступили против, власти поддержали, а после этого еще и президент поручил проверить приватизацию БСК. Так что про БСК мы наверняка еще услышим, хотя вот работа вскоре может завершиться, поскольку, собственно, сырья у нее больше скоро не останется. Ну вот, если поговорить по транспорт, у нас последние месяцы такая тема актуальная, так вот на этой неделе самый популярный транспортный объект не аэропорты, как это было во время коронавируса, а трасса Таврида, по которой проехался президент. И будь Таврида компании, она была бы у нас в топ-25 Скана. Ну, еще про транспорт. В Москве закрывают троллейбусные маршруты, поэтому у нас активно вспоминали про троллейбусы 5000 раз за последние 7 дней. Электробус пока отстает, хотя, судя по всему, будущее за ним, так что упоминаемость его растет. Вот в 3 раза выросла на этой неделе против среднего значения. Ну, теперь про организации. Самая упоминаемая организация с точки зрения прироста на этой неделе — Федеральная служба судебных приставов. У нее рекордная упоминаемость за всю ее историю. Не так часто про нее пишут СМИ. И сейчас она тоже находится во второй части топ-50. Ее руководитель встречался с президентом Путиным, попросил денег на наведение порядка с коллекторами и получил поддержку президента. Так что и про коллекторов вспомнили, писали про них на этой неделе 3000 раз журналисты. Это рекордный показатель с февраля. При этом, как показывает Скан, 650 публикаций из этих 3000 были негативными. Ну и вот в эти 600, примерно по 600, были такие слова, как незаконный, угроза, черный, ну, имеется в виду черный коллектор. Так что вот такая картина непростая, и в ней будем разбираться в этой части программы.
Да, и начнем мы разбираться с небольшого досье от Константина Таранова.
Президент Владимир Путин поручил главе Федеральной службы судебных приставов Дмитрию Арестову представить предложение по усилению контроля над деятельностью коллекторов. Руководитель ведомства посетовал, что в настоящее время ФССП не подконтрольны коллекторы, действующие в микрофинансовых организациях. По его словам, этот вопрос должен быть решен уже до конца будущего года, если служба сможет нанять дополнительно 400 сотрудников и увеличить бюджет на 270 миллионов рублей в год. Путин пообещал поддержку в этом вопросе и заявил, что ситуацию с коллекторами нужно будет брать под контроль. В Госдуме тем временем подготовили законопроект об ужесточении наказания за незаконную коллекторскую деятельность, связанную с применением насилия и угроз, а также причинением вреда гражданам и их имуществу. Законопроектом предлагается дополнить Уголовный кодекс новой статьей, которая установит ответственность за незаконную коллекторскую деятельность вплоть до лишения свободы на срок до 12 лет. По словам главы Комитета Госдумы по безопасности и противодействию коррупции Василия Пискарева, за последние 2 года ФССП поступило более 47 тысяч жалоб на действия коллекторов. Число таких обращений растет, и это доказывает, что существующие меры ответственности неэффективны. Правительство России, в свою очередь, подготовило поправки в Кодекс об административных правонарушениях, которые предусматривают усиление ответственности за разного рода незаконные действия по возврату просроченной задолженности, например, за использование разного рода способов давления на должников. Согласно законопроекту, административный штраф для юридических лиц может составить в таких случаях до 500 тысяч рублей.
Это был Константин Таранов. Ну, а зрители нашей трансляции в YouTube могут увидеть сейчас наших новых экспертов. Это Андрей Параич, директор Ассоциации «Национальная лига финансовых советников». Андрей, добрый день.
Добрый день.
И Борис Воронин, директор Национальной ассоциации профессиональных коллекторских агентств. Здравствуйте, Борис.
Да, добрый вечер,
Владимир.
Коллеги. Ну вот про коллекторов в последние годы вспоминали часто, но в последнее время чуть реже, после принятия 3 года назад закона, который ужесточил порядки для коллекторов. Что изменилось? Почему, Андрей, наверное, начнем с вас. Что изменилось? Почему вспомнили про коллекторов именно сейчас?
Я бы сказал, что сейчас уже не за горами то время, когда начнут снова работать банки и коллекторские агентства с теми людьми, которые получили кредитные каникулы в момент начала пандемии. И вполне вероятно, что в этот момент мы увидим увеличение объема просроченной задолженности и, соответственно, увеличение активности коллекторских агентств. Я не уверен, что это именно тот толчок, который привел, собственно, главу ФССП к главе государства. Но, тем не менее, действительно, в ближайшее время мы можем заметить какую-то активизацию работы в этом направлении и, возможно, увеличение количества жалоб на действия коллекторов. Но справедливости ради, надо сказать, что, конечно, коллекторский рынок сильно изменился за последние несколько лет, и, на мой взгляд, та острота проблемы, которая была там лет 5 назад, она сейчас, конечно, выглядит не настолько проблемной, как и раньше.
Борис, а ваше мнение, почему вспомнили, и что же не работает в полной мере закон, который был принят 3 с лишним года назад?
Потому что сейчас в рамках регуляторных...
Ой, Борис, у вас там что-то со звуком, мне кажется, не очень хорошо.
Я должен переключиться.
Да, может быть, вы попробуете подключиться заново и проверить просто настройки вашего звука, потому что, если я правильно понимаю, мы вас совсем не слышим. Да. Давайте мы пока продолжим.
Тогда. Ну вот именно Федеральной службе судебных приставов поручили, согласно вот этому закону, который был принят 3 с лишним года назад, следить за коллекторами, штрафовать их, если возникает такая необходимость, собирать жалобы. Тогда эта тема очень активно обсуждалась. Насколько они выполняют свою роль, насколько это действительно ведомство, которое наводит порядок в этой сфере?
Действительно, все сильно поменялось, то есть коллекторы стали работать более цивилизованно, то есть те организации, которые действуют в легальном поле и состоят в реестре ФССП, в большинстве своем соблюдают те нормы, которые задекларированы законом. То есть это и количество контактов с должником, которые ограничено этим законом, это и способы, которыми происходит взаимодействие, и много других норм, которые защищают заемщика, оказавшегося в тяжелой ситуации. Но, конечно, как, наверное, правильно отмечали в прессе, существует еще часть коллекторского рынка, я надеюсь, она не очень большая, Борис, я надеюсь, к нам вернется и прокомментирует, то, что можно назвать черными коллекторами, то есть те организации, которые не входят в реестр ФССП, это могут быть, наверное, и частные лица, которые, естественно, не соблюдают те требования, которые установлены 230-м законом, и от которые бросают тень на весь коллекторский рынок.
Андрей, простите, а какой вот резон, например, компаниям, которым нужно работать с должниками, обращаться именно к этим черным коллекторам, а не к белым?
Я бы, наверное, сказал, что плотность взаимодействия и, условно сказать, то есть взыскиваемость долгов при использовании методов на грани фола, она, наверное, все-таки выше, чем когда коллектор действует полностью в рамках закона и соблюдает все права должника. Но, наверное, те организации, которые к таким коллекторам черным обращаются, тоже отнести к добросовестным участникам рынка сложно. Все-таки те организации, которые за свое реноме переживают, которые хотят работать на рынке долго и хотят развиваться, вряд ли будут к таким коллекторским агентствам обращаться.
Так, Борис, попытка номер 2. Я спрашивал по поводу того, как работает закон. Надеюсь, сейчас будет вас слышно. К сожалению, почему-то не слышно.
Вообще, да, прям совсем плохо. Борис, извините, но мы вас просто даже не можем услышать и понять, что вы говорите. Да,
так, ну вот тогда, может быть, мы по телефону с Борисом попытаемся потом соединиться. Но вот обсуждался вопрос на встрече с президентом про то, чтобы распространить действие фактически этого закона, который в отношении коллекторов действует, и в отношении и банков, и в первую очередь МФО. То есть, чтобы все были, я так понимаю, на одной доске. Почему это актуально? Что у нас МФО не так делают на этом рынке, насколько они тут нарушают вот те нормы, которые действуют в отношении, скажем, других коллекторов цивилизованно?
Я бы не сказал, что что-то не так. Это скорее разница в регулировании, потому что сейчас получается, что коллекторское агентство находится под надзором ФССП, а действия по взысканию, которые осуществляет кредитор сам, то есть кредитор — это микрофинансовая организация или банк, они попадают уже в юрисдикцию Центрального банка. И здесь уже возникает вопрос и межведомственного взаимодействия, то есть насколько ФССП, обнаруживший нарушения со стороны микрофинансовой организации, передаст эти сведения ФССП и обратно. Поэтому, наверное, если бы все было в едином правовом поле, немножко проще было бы разбираться с конкретным нарушением, то есть практика была бы более единообразна. Но микрофинансовые организации, в частности, они в эту сторону работают сами, не дожидаясь реакции законодателя, и многие нормы, которые относятся к ведению ФССП, вводят в свой оборот стандартами саморегулируемых организаций. Со стороны банков такого движения я пока не видел, но и сказать, что там большее количество жалоб идет именно на действия самого кредитора, а не на коллекторское агентство, наверное, здесь тоже нельзя.
Так, я понимаю, что Борис у нас подсоединился, да?
Да, мы пытаемся теперь взять Бориса просто со звуком, без картинки. Так, сейчас вот подключается звук. Ну, давай сделаем третью попытку, и ты еще раз... Нет, что-то он бьется. Да, и ты еще раз попробуешь задать Борису свой вопрос.
Да, попытка номер 3, Борис, по поводу закона и какие есть в этом законе недостатки, которые потребовалось исправить вот именно сейчас.
Так. Борис. Ну, давайте я пока напомню, что у нас в эфире Андрей Паранич, директор Ассоциации «Национальная лига финансовых советников», и мы пытаемся также договориться с Борисом Ворониным, директором Национальной ассоциации профессиональных коллекторских агентств. Это у нас получается несколько хуже. Давайте мы действительно попробуем просто взять Бориса Воронина по телефону. Прошу я сейчас нашего звукорежиссера.
Связь. Да. Борис, я надеюсь, сейчас будет слышно. Итак, про закон и какие потребовалось исправить в нем недостатки.
Ну, начну с того вопроса, на котором я сломался, мой зум. Значит, смотрите, на самом деле, конечно, цель визита директора ФССП России была в первую очередь, это, о чем было четко сказано в интервью, в этой встрече, это добиться согласия так называемого финансово-экономического блока на увеличение числа ставок службы. А с другой стороны, повод хороший, потому что сейчас как раз идет работа над новой версией, фактически новой версией 230-го закона о защите прав интересов граждан при взыскании просроченной задолженности. Меня нормально слышно?
Да, отлично, спасибо. Продолжайте, пожалуйста.
Да, хорошо. Вот поэтому главная причина была это. А что касается самого закона, мы должны признать, на самом деле, очень грустную вещь в нашей стране. Дело в том, что мы занимаемся тем, что бесконечно пишем новые законы, но не очень занимаемся тем, чтобы имеющиеся законы работали. Я думаю, что Андрей Паранич не даст мне соврать. Всем вполне давно известно, кто занимается хулиганством на финансовом рынке. То есть это на кого граждане жалуются. Это, кстати, прозвучало, опять же, и в разговоре президента с директором службы. Это микрофинансовые организации. Микрофинансовые организации и некоторые коллекторские агентства, связанные с ними. По сути, дочерние компании. Опять же, Андрей Паранич не даст мне соврать, он долго проработал в этой сфере. Все имена владельцев этих компаний, фамилии Корнилов, Поликарпов, все это известно давно. Все прекрасно знают, кто хулиганит, какими методами пользуется и, собственно, на кого бы надо напустить наши государственные органы. Но, к сожалению, сколько законов не пишем, 230-й будут поправки в Уголовный кодекс, они не будут просто действовать, потому что этих хулиганов просто не трогают. Максимум их щекочет немножечко штрафами. 20 тысяч, в некоторых случаях 300 тысяч. По большому счету щекочет.
Щекочет, но с другой стороны, коллекторы все называются одним словом. И у нас часто и в СМИ, и в общественном сознании черные коллекторы, полуколлекторы,
Владимир,
профессиональные коллекторы, все одним цветом.
Сознание, оно не разделяет. Я, собственно, даже не говорю о том, что нужно разделить и нас, соответственно, профессиональных коллекторов хвалить и захваливать. а микрофинансистов чернить и поносить. На самом деле надо просто понять, кто там хулиганит. Как только вы понимаете это, вы сразу понимаете, что нет никаких черных коллекторов. Есть вполне официальные, зарегистрированные в государственном реестре Центрального банка микрофинансовые организации, которые как револьвер заменяют одна другую, которая выскочила из реестра, на место ее стоит другая. Эта схема совершенно неубиваемая, никакого влияния на нее 230 не окажет, уголовный кодекс, боюсь, тоже. Вот такая ситуация.
Ну вот, тем не менее, каждый раз в ходе очередного политического цикла, вот следующий цикл у нас это выборы в Госдуму, все время темы коллекторов возникают, и радикальный вариант вовсе их запретить, и чтобы никаких коллекторов не было. Эта тема, на ваш взгляд, может снова возникнуть? Андрей, ваше мнение?
Я считаю, что коллекторский рынок, конечно, запрещать ни в коем случае нельзя и нецелесообразно. Тема, наверное, возникнет, но сложно ожидать, что работа коллекторов будет кому-то нравиться. Просто сам факт взаимодействия коллектора и его клиента, он в себе позитива особого не несет. И, конечно, когда возникают очередные политические движения, то тему коллектора поднимают как тему, которая генерит достаточно большое количество жалоб и там, негативных эмоций со стороны населения. Но если мы рассмотрим тему со стороны экономики, то это вполне нормальная деятельность, она абсолютно легальна, и все, что нужно делать, это действительно, как Борис говорит, приводить в порядок работу рынка для того, чтобы права тех людей, которые стали клиентами коллекторского агентства, не нарушались.
Ну вот жалуются часто и на коллекторов профессиональных. Ну, впрочем, как верно было сказано, кто же будет хвалить-то коллектора, да? Он ничего приятного не делает. Было бы смешно, если бы их хвалили, да? Сколько процентов жалоб оправдывается?
Знаете, на самом деле, если посмотреть на статистику даже того же ФССП России, жалоб оправданных очень незначительное число. Но я бы здесь разделил жалобы на разные виды, потому что когда человеку, ну, скажем, позвонили 3-й раз за неделю, ну, это одно, да? И другое дело, когда человеку звонят и угрожают убить детей, изнасиловать жену, его самого там закопать и так далее. Вот эти вот все вещи, они абсолютно нетерпимы. Мы даже не можем говорить, что это финансовый рынок. Я считаю, что это просто вот эти вот микрофинансисты хулиганы, это просто уголовщина на финансовом рынке, и игнорирование этого невозможно. По поводу электорального цикла. Безусловно, демагоги будут и дальше говорить что-то там, запретить этих, запретить тех. Но, на мой взгляд, что нужно сделать, да, если мы отвлечемся от демагогов, это создать всего лишь межведомственную рабочую группу МВД, управление К, которое помогло бы ФССП России ловить телефонных хулиганов, потому что на самом деле 99% это именно телефонные хулиганства, запугивание людей. Само ФССП России, которое выписывает штрафы достаточно активно, но зачастую не может доказать, и это, кстати, та часть недоказанных дел, как бы неподтвержденных жалоб. И Банк России, который мог бы вычищать свой реестр с микрофинансистами гораздо более активно, чем то, как он делает сейчас. Вот это решение, которое, на мой взгляд, в течение 3 месяцев могло бы решить всю эту проблему с дополнительными ставками объяснить, но решить.
Ну вот еще одна новость. Это было заявление Банка России, который напомнил банкам, что нужно давать возможность заемщикам выбирать, готовы они к тому, чтобы их задолженность была передана конкретному коллектору или не готовы. Если действительно это будет массовой практикой и люди будут отказываться от возможности передачи, во-первых, насколько на это будут готовы банки, и во-вторых, как это может изменить рынок, Андрей?
Здесь я бы сказал, что, вот, на мой взгляд, отказ заемщика от передачи уступки долга не в интересах заемщика как такового. Ну, во-первых, это ничего не решает, то есть, по сути, кредитор просто вместо уступки долга будет передавать на агентское взыскание коллекторскому агентству, но вряд ли будет менять кардинально свою бизнес-модель. Но при передаче долга коллекторскому агентству по уступке заемщик чаще всего выигрывает. Потому что в большинстве случаев в практике коллекторского агентства при уступке долга коллектор останавливает начисление штрафов по купленному долгу. И больше того, в ряде там, случаев на переговоры готов идти на дисконт. А вот когда заемщик-должник общается с самим кредитором, он, во-первых, не добьется остановки начисления штрафов, и дисконт крайне редко появляется в такой ситуации. Поэтому скорее заемщик проиграет, чем выиграет, если будет устанавливать вот такую вот норму, что он запрещает уступку долга. Но норма записана в законе, и Банк России всего лишь про нее напомнил.
Да, Борис, что коллекторы думают?
Дополнил бы Андрей в том, что на самом деле мы забываем все время о том, кто общается с должником. То есть вот опять же, откуда идут жалобы. Большинство контактов с должником, то есть превалирующие там порядка 80%, это контакты кредитора с должником. И если мы вспомним историю недавнюю, сколько там лет прошло, 10, когда небезызвестный банк «Русский стандарт», начинатель потребительского кредитования в стране, оказалось его владельцу достаточно всего одного визита в Генеральную прокуратуру, чтобы он кардинально поменял работу с должниками со своими, скажем так, мы понимаем прекрасно, что вот проблема очень часто она смещается. То есть она часто маскирует словами коллектор, а еще лучше она маскирует словами черный коллектор, черный кредитор, то есть вообще выдуманные сущности, в принципе, несуществующих вещей. И еще раз говорю, государство имеет все возможности для того, чтобы буквально в течение 3 месяцев прекратить это безобразие.
Помимо государства, закона, есть еще и современные технологии. Насколько в будущем и уже сейчас все больше это будет не общение с каким-нибудь там человеком, коллектором, а автоматический некий процесс, робот, учет психологии. Насколько вообще будет меняться эта сфера с развитием технологий? Борис?
Сейчас, на самом деле, немалая часть контактов такого предварительного этапа, начального этапа, в первую очередь, в кредитных организациях, в крупных, типа наших флагманов Синего банка, Зеленого банка, они осуществляются роботом. Но надо просто понимать, что, во-первых, наши люди, в общем, люди во всем мире не очень любят общаться с роботом. И, во-вторых, как бы много не говорили про искусственный интеллект, он сейчас пока еще тупенький, просто тупенький. И просто не хватает на что-либо больше, чем позвонить буквально в режиме расширенного такого автоинформатора. Поэтому пока современные технологии штука хорошая. Я вам скажу немножко другую, более современную технологию, которая сейчас есть на рынке, как именно коллекторов. Она состоит в том, что вы вообще не контактируете с должником. Получив долг по сессии или в агентскую работу, его сразу просуживают. То есть на самом деле обращаются в суд, это гораздо проще, быстрее, удобнее, значительно меньше создает проблем для самого коллектора. А уж как там гражданину, это уже другой разговор. Но, по крайней мере, сбывается мечта многих чиновников, которые говорят, а что там обсуждать, зачем какая-то медиация, какие-то договоренности до погашения долга. Просто все в суд. Все в суд идут и спокойно списывают деньги со счетов граждан. Проблем никаких.
Борис, и последний вопрос. Вот Андрей начал с того, что актуальность этой теме сейчас придает вот эта ситуация с коронавирусом. Многие заемщики оказались в сложной ситуации, кто-то не платит по долгам. Насколько вы, как индустрия коллекторов, чувствуете вот некую остроту ситуации именно сейчас?
Безусловно, с апреля-мая было заметно снижение эффективности работы. То есть платить стали меньше. Объективно, если у людей нет денег, то они платить больше не будут. То есть это, закон жизни, и неважно, просудишь ты с ним или ты с ним договоришься и получишь его обещание заплатить, но у него денег нет. Поэтому эффективность снизилась, с одной стороны. С другой стороны, объем работы профессиональным коллекторам прибавился, потому что некоторые банки закрывали на время карантина свои колл-центры, а коллекторы сумели наладить работу в удаленном режиме для своих сотрудников. Опять же, колл-центров выездники, естественно, не работали. Ожидать какого-то серьезного изменения осенью я не жду, на самом деле. То есть там какая-то вторая волна должников, еще что-то. Во-первых, скорее всего, большинство людей, получивших кредитные каникулы, вы знаете, что по закону 106-му, они были разрешены, их получило ничтожное количество, в стране порядка 200 тысяч человек. И еще 2 миллиона получили по банковским программам, которые совсем не такие мягкие и нежные, как кредитные каникулы по 106-му закону. По существу граждане, выйдя на работу, получили возможность выплачивать долг. Поэтому, если работа в стране есть, если экономика хотя бы не падает, то и выплаты будут, и каких-либо вторых волн, каких-то трагедий, там, заката банковской системы, ждать совершенно не приходится. Наоборот, уже сейчас...
Спасибо вам большое. Это Борис Воронин, директор Национальной ассоциации профессиональных коллекторских агентств. С нами был также Андрей Паранич, директор Ассоциации Национальной лиги финансовых советников. Мы завершаем на этом программу «Сканер». Ольга Бычкова, Владимир Герасимов. До встречи через неделю. Мне остается только сказать нашим слушателям прямого эфира «Эхо Москвы», что в следующем часе у нас программа «Доехали», а сразу после полуночи, после новостей в 0 часов программа «1» с Антоном Орехом. Счастливо, пока.
Это программа «Сканер».
День в день. Час в час. Минута в минуту. Эхо Москвы.
Радио «Эхо Москвы».
23 часа в столице. Здравствуйте, в студии Константин Мирошников. На Эхе Новости. Президент Франции предостерег Россию от военного вмешательства в Беларуси. В ходе пресс-конференции в Париже Эммануэль Макрон сказал, что не хотел бы повторения украинского сценария, сообщает агентство Рейтер. Макрон пообещал продолжить разговор с Владимиром Путиным о необходимости убедить Александра Лукашенко в необходимости посредничества. Сегодня глава Беларуси рассказал о договоренности с российским коллегой о совместном использовании войск в случае угрозы со стороны Запада. Премьер-министр Южной Осетии объявил об отставке после протестов, начавшихся перед зданием правительства. Местные жители выражали возмущение из-за смерти Инала Джабиева, подозреваемого по делу о покушении на главу МВД. Как пишет сайт «Кавказский узел», родственники умершего считают, что его пытали. Сотрудники полиции сегодня оцепили больницу. Неизвестные, напомню, обстреляли автомобиль министра еще на прошлой неделе. В результате никто не пострадал. Власти Башкирии оценили ущерб от приватизации башкирской содовой компании в 35 миллиардов рублей. Это предварительные подсчеты, сказал глава региона Ради Хабиров. На днях президент Владимир Путин поручил разобраться с ситуацией вокруг БСК. Уже сегодня Генпрокуратура сообщила о найденном в сделке нарушении закона. Об этом сказал официальный представитель ведомства Андрей Иванов.
В ходе проверки законности отчуждения государственных акций предприятий содовой промышленности в Республике Башкортостан выявлены нарушения, прежде всего, самой процедуры приватизации. В целях защиты интересов государства Генпрокуратурой России заявлен судебный иск об истребовании имущества из чужого незаконного владения. Материалы проверки по фактам злоупотреблений направлены в Следственный комитет для рассмотрения вопроса о возбуждении уголовного дела в отношении должностных лиц региональных органов власти.
Ранее Владимир Путин обратил внимание на кампанию на фоне выступления активистов, которые протестовали против разработки горы Куштау. Путин выразил сомнение в том, что нынешние собственники БСК заинтересованы в развитии компании региона и сказал, что владельцы выводят деньги в офшоры. На фоне рекордного падения продаж Coca-Cola планирует провести массовую реорганизацию. Из документа, размещенного на сайте компании, следует, что она сократит почти половину подразделений, уволит 4000 сотрудников в Северной Америке. Как ожидается, на выплату пособий уйдет до $500 миллиарда. В разгар пандемии продажи производителя упали почти на треть. В таком же объеме сократилась и чистая прибыль. Отмечается, что в условиях распространения коронавируса многие страны мира позакрывали бары и рестораны, на которые приходится почти половина выручки компании. Плюс 16 градусов сейчас в Москве, давление 741 миллиметр ртутного столба. Ночью плюс 13, завтра по прогнозам синоптиков около 21 градуса тепла и преимущественно без осадков. Константин Мирошников, служба информации «Эхо Москвы».
«Доехали» — это программа не об автомобилях, а о том, как их водить безопасно и надежно.
В эту пятницу после 23 часов в программе «Доехали». Сколько нужно лошадиных сил? В студии Ольга Бычкова и гонщик-инструктор, автомобильный журналист Михаил Горбачев. «Доехали» в пятницу после 11 вечера.
Мгновенный доступ к важнейшим файлам. Радио «Эхо Москвы».
Эконет. Всем привет, с вами Ирина Баблоян и программа «Эхонет», сервис для быстрого расслабления на работе. Сайт, о котором пойдет сегодня речь, calm.com. Ученые утверждают, что короткий отдых во время работы позволяет мозгу работать намного быстрее и продуктивнее. Спать на рабочем месте некрасиво, да и неудобно. Удалиться из кабинета минут на 20 тоже неправильно. А вот надеть наушники и отключиться на 20 минут от окружающего мира вполне реально. Сервис Calm поможет вам в этом. Достаточно только зайти на сайт, надеть наушники и закрыть глаза. Вы не заметите, как начнете улыбаться, успокоитесь и придете в гармонию с самим собой. Если вы откроете глаза, то увидите прекрасную картинку на экране. Это может быть голубое небо, пляж, лес или необитаемый остров. На сайте есть два меню. Одно находится слева, там вы можете выбрать время для виртуальной медитации. На сайте есть два меню. Одно находится слева, там вы можете выбрать время для виртуальной медитации. Наведите мыши на нарисованное у буддиста и выберите 2, 5, 10, 15 или 20 минут. Далее можно поставить будильник. Если вдруг вы уснете, то он разбудит вас через установленное время. А в нижнем левом углу экрана будет идти обратный отсчет. Второе меню находится в самом низу экрана. Там вы можете сменить картинку. Вместе с картинкой меняется музыка. Но это тоже поправимо. Третья по счету клавиша как раз и устанавливает эти параметры. Вы можете оставить понравившуюся вам картинку и поменять музыку. Ну или наоборот. Также вы можете просто отключить звук и любоваться красотами. У сервиса есть хорошие мобильные приложения для iPhone и для Android. Скачать их можно в первом меню. Сервис хороший и очень красивый. Заходите на него незамедлительно, отдыхайте и наблюдайте за тем, как будет расти ваша продуктивность на работе. Сайт, о котором я вам сегодня рассказывала, calm.com. Ваши вопросы и предложения, которые касаются интересных сайтов и мобильных приложений, присылайте мне на электронный ящик ai.bublayan@gmail.com. Весь Эханет и ссылки на ресурсы, о которых идет речь в программе, вы сможете найти на сайте echo.msk.ru в программе Эханет. Ну а для того, чтобы первым узнавать о самых интересных сайтах и приложениях, можно подписаться на аккаунт Эхонет РСС в Твиттере. С вами была Ирина Бублаян.
Disconnected. Смотрите трансляцию этой программы на нашем канале YouTube и в Яндекс.Эфире.
Доехали.
«23:06, уже 07 московское время. Добрый вечер. Это программа «Доехали». У микрофона Ольга Бычкова. И добрый вечер Мише Горбачеву, автомобильному журналисту, гонщику и инструктору по безопасному вождению. Миша, здрасте. Хорошо ли вы меня слышите?
Да, отлично слышу. Добрый вечер.
Да, у нас все прекрасно. Я напомню нашим слушателям, что, как обычно, у нас идет трансляция в Ютьюбе на канале «Эхо Авто». Там есть такой чат, где можно принимать участие в разных разговорах, в обсуждениях, задавать вопросы, все вот это вот делать, как обычно, рассказывать всякие свои истории, поучительные или смешные, или страшные, или какие угодно. Ну и ближе к середине часа мы будем включать телефон прямого эфира «Эхо Москвы». Он всегда тот же самый, +7 495 363 36 59. Звоните нам с любыми вопросами, которые вы хотите задать Мише, и с любыми рассказами, которыми вы хотите с нами поделиться. Ну, а Миша обещал мне сегодня ответить на вопрос, который периодически возникает не только у меня. Сколько нужно, вообще говоря, лошадиных сил в вашей машине? Мне кажется, что, с одной стороны, нет предела совершенству технологии, а с другой стороны, ну вот зачем, спрашивается, столько?
Да, Ольга, вы абсолютно правы, столько совершенно не нужно. Я в прошлый уикенд ездил на Moscow Raceway. Там проходил чемпионат России по кольцевым гонкам. Вы помните, мы год назад с вами там были.
Да, это было для меня прям очень большое.
Фантастика, да. Так много народу, как в прошлый раз, естественно, не было, потому что было официально без зрителей, но с VIP-приглашенными. Соблюдая все, естественно, санитарные нормы, то есть ограниченное количество народу, и все было там сделано так, чтобы, в общем, минимальный был риск заражения. Я был на трибуне. Мне было интересно, подышать гоночным воздухом, посмотреть, как будет развиваться события. События развиваются всегда очень интересно, особенно в классе Туринг. Есть такой класс. Туринг – это очень быстрая машина, это вообще международный класс TCR, и руководство происходит этим классом из Европы, то есть это национальный, как бы у нас, отросток от международной серии в России, и проходят эти гонки в классе Туринг. Вообще там 6 гонок разных, 6 разных классов в чемпионате России по шоссейно-кольцевым гонкам. Это очень интересно. Но самый интересный, конечно, класс Туринг. Мне там очень интересно наблюдать, как борются пилоты «Лады» с другими командами, потому что пилоты «Лады» выступают, понятное дело, на автомобилях «Лада», а остальные команды выступают на иностранных автомобилях. Там есть и Volkswagen, и Audi, и Hyundai, и они, конечно, очень все быстрые, но дело в том, что этот класс TCR международный, он очень хитро сделан с точки зрения технических требований. Там максимально придумано так, чтобы все зависело от пилота. Максимально, чтобы зависело от пилота. Зимой проводятся специальные тесты, на которых технические характеристики, программы двигателей этих автомобилей, они выравниваются. То есть все приводится к одинаковой мощности. И это делается для того, чтобы не было как в Формуле-1. В Формуле-1 мы многие годы наблюдали, как быстро ездит Михаэль Шумахер, дай бог ему здоровья, на Сейчас мы наблюдаем, как парни быстро ездят на болиде Mercedes-Benz, и никакой там конкуренции нет в помине. И это, конечно, неинтересно. Вот в Туринге, в классе российских кольцевых гонок, это намного интереснее, потому что там мало того, что изначально автомобили с полностью, с одинаковой мощностью двигателя, но конструктивно, естественно, это разные модели. У одного лучшая аэродинамика, хотя там есть аэродинамические приспособления. И, например, наша «Лада», она продувалась в аэродинамической трубе фирмы Пининфарина, между прочим.
Что значит продувалась?
Продувалась, Ольга, в прямом смысле. Аэродинамическая труба такое большое приспособление, куда ставится настоящий автомобиль, и идет встречный поток воздуха, который имитирует скорость, допустим, 100 км в час, 200 км в час. И специальные датчики записывают, куда идут все потоки. Надо, чтобы было минимальное сопротивление, при этом максимальная прижимная сила. То есть аэродинамика играет очень большую роль. Но «Лада» с мотором 1800 кубических сантиметров, а все остальные с мотором 2 литра, во-первых. Но это не страшно, потому что мощность у всех одинаковая. Она делается, как я уже сказал, принудительным образом одинаковой, потому что прошиваются программы двигателя. Это получается приблизительно 350 лошадиных сил. Конечно, это много, но это машина турбированная. С турбомотора можно снять спокойно такую мощность, причем при очень большом ресурсе. На этих машинах моторы обычно ходят, это у нас 7 этапов, это 14 гонок, потому что на каждом этапе 2 гонки. 14 гонок, в принципе, выдерживает один мотор. Естественно, там все опломбировано, ничего нельзя менять. И мне очень интересно, как пилоты в этой серии едут, потому что там, знаете, даже есть такая ситуация, тот, кто выигрывает, ему добавляют балласт. Его нагружают в машину, там 20, 30, 40 килограмм, а это огромное значение имеет. Это сразу же отнимает секунды с круга, и если ты выигрываешь, то давай теперь выигрывай на более тяжелой машине. Это во-первых. Во-вторых, на первой гонке
Они после этого продолжают выигрывать? Или они тут же становятся первыми, последними, вернее, наоборот?
Нет, они последними не становятся, но им становится очень тяжело. Есть такие случаи, когда и на тяжелой машине тоже, в общем, очень хорошо едут, но там идет такая очень интересная игра, потому что тот, кто на легкой машине, он, конечно,